When you stop trying to contact a man, something powerful begins to happen, not just to him, but to the entire dynamic of the relationship. You see, silence is not just the absence of words. It's a force, a presence that speaks louder than any conversation ever could. It's in that silence that the real work begins. For him, for you, for the truth of the situation to emerge. A man's response to silence is a reflection of where his heart and mind truly are. It forces him to confront something he may have been avoiding, the reality of your absence. You see, as long as you're reaching out, as long as you're calling, texting, trying to make things happen, it's easy for him to lean back, take you for granted, and assume you'll always be there. But when the silence sets in, that's when the questions start to whisper in his mind. At first, he might not even notice. Life is busy, distractions are everywhere. But as the days go by, the absence begins to echo. Why hasn't she called? Why hasn't she texted? What's going on? And in that moment, he's faced with something uncomfortable. Uncertainty. That's not a feeling most men are used to. Men like certainty, control, knowing where things stand. Your silence strips all that away. Now, I'm not saying every man will react the same way. Some will brush it off, convinced it's no big deal. But even the ones who shrug at first can't escape the pull of that silence. It's just like a mirror being held up, forcing him to look at himself, his actions, his priorities, his feelings. And let me tell you something, it's not always a pretty picture. That silence, that space, gives him time to think. And thinking is powerful. It's where realization begins. Maybe he starts to realize how much he's taking you for granted. Maybe he starts to see how much he misses your laugh, your kindness, your presence. Or maybe, and this is just as important, he realizes he's not as invested as he thought he was. That's the beauty of silence. It reveals the truth, whatever that truth may be. You have to understand, though, this isn't just about him. It's about you, too. Silence is a gift, not just to him, but to yourself. It's a chance for you to step back, breathe, and focus on your own worth. Because when you stop trying to contact him, you're not just giving him space, you're giving yourself permission to let go of the weight of constantly proving your value. And here's the thing about a man's response. It tells you everything you need to know about where he stands. If he values you, if he truly sees what you bring to his life, that silence will wake him up. It'll stir something inside him, a desire to reach out, to reconnect, and make things right. But if he doesn't, if he stays distant, unbothered, unmoved, then you've learned something too. That silence is not a weapon, it's a test. It's a way of saying, I know my worth, and I refuse to chase what isn't meant for me. It's not about manipulation or games. It's about clarity. It's about allowing the truth to rise to the surface, even if that truth is hard to hear. Because here's what I know, when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to fill the silence with noise, you find out who's really willing to meet you where you are. And that's a powerful thing. You're no longer guessing, wondering, hoping. You're standing firm, letting the universe or that man show you exactly where you stand in his life. And that's not just brave, it's necessary. Necessary for your growth, necessary for your peace, necessary for your future. Because the right person, the one who truly values you, won't let that silence linger for long. So as you sit with the quiet, as you hold your ground, remember this. The response you get or don't get is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his readiness, his priorities, his feelings. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself and for him is to let that silence do the talking. Let it speak. Let it reveal. Let it set you free. When we talk about communication, it's easy to think it's all about the words, the text, the calls, the back and forth exchanges. But sometimes the most powerful communication happens in the spaces between the words, in what's left unsaid, in the pauses we create. When you stop trying to contact someone, when you step back, something profound happens to the balance of power in that relationship. It shifts, it realigns, and it reveals what was hidden beneath the surface all along. Now, let me be clear. Relationships aren't supposed to be power struggles. It's not about who's in control or who has the upper hand. But let's not pretend that power dynamics don't play a role. They do. Every time you reach out, every time you're the one initiating, you're giving something of yourself, your time, your energy, your vulnerability. And when that effort isn't reciprocated, when it's met with indifference or half-hearted responses, that's where imbalance starts to creep in. You see, when you're the one constantly reaching out, it can feel like you're chasing. You're the one keeping the connection alive, the one holding up the weight of the relationship. And that's exhausting, it's draining. It makes you question your worth, your value. But the moment you stop, when you decide, I'm not going to carry this alone anymore, everything changes. Suddenly, the ball is in his court. And that's where the real test begins. Because when you're no longer putting in all the effort, he has to decide what this relationship means to him. He has to decide if he's willing to meet you halfway, to step up and put in the work. And let me tell you, that decision reveals everything about where he stands. There's a certain power in that pause. It forces a man to face himself, to confront the reality of what he's been contributing or not contributing to the relationship. Has he been coasting along, taking your effort for granted? Has he been leaning on your willingness to always reach out, to always be there? Or has he been genuinely invested, truly meeting you with the same energy you've been giving? That silence, that space is where the truth comes to light. It's where you find out if he values you enough to fight for the connection, to make an effort to show you that you matter. Because a man who values you, a man who truly sees your worth, won't let that silence stretch on for too long. He'll feel the shift, the imbalance, and he'll move to correct it. But if he doesn't, if he lets the silence linger, if he seems unbothered, unchanged, unmoved, then you've learned something too. You've learned where you stand in his life. And as hard as that truth may be to accept, it's a truth you need to know. Because you deserve someone who doesn't leave you questioning, someone who doesn't let you carry the weight of the relationship alone. What's important to understand is that stepping back isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate a response. It's about reclaiming your time, your energy, your peace. It's about saying, I'm not going to pour into something that isn't pouring back into me. And that's not selfish, it's necessary. It's healthy. When you stop trying to contact him, it also gives you a chance to recenter yourself, to remember your own worth, your own value outside of his response or lack of response. because your worth isn't defined by how much effort you put into a relationship or by how someone else reacts to your silence. Your worth is inherent, it's unshakable. And here's the beautiful thing: when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to force a connection, you create space for something real to grow. If he's truly invested, if he truly cares, he'll step up. He'll reach out. He'll show you that he's willing to do his part. But if he doesn't, then you've created space for something or someone better to come into your life. So when you stop trying to contact him, you're not just changing the dynamics of the relationship. You're setting a standard. You're saying, I deserve mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual care. And that's not just about power, it's about love, real love. And because real love doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't make you feel like you're always the one chasing, the one holding on, the one doing all the work. Real love is balanced. It's reciprocal. It's a partnership, not a one-sided effort. So when you step back, when you stop trying, you're giving both of you a chance to find out what's real. You're creating space for clarity, for truth, for growth. And that is one of the most powerful things you can do, not just for the relationship, but for yourself. Because in the end, the right person won't just respond to your silence, they'll appreciate it. They'll rise to meet you in that space you've created, not because you forced their hand, but because they want to. Because they see your value and they're willing to match it. That's the kind of love you deserve. And anything less, let it go. When you stop trying to contact a man, something subtle yet profound begins to unfold. It's as if the noise of constant interaction fades, leaving behind a quiet space where deeper truths can emerge. In that stillness, a man is forced to sit with himself, his thoughts, his feelings. And for some, that can be a challenging place to be. And it's in this space that introspection takes root. And whether he realizes it or not, the process begins to peel back the layers of his emotions and reveal what lies beneath. You see, men often operate in a rhythm of motion. There's work to do, goals to chase, distractions to indulge. That constant forward momentum can make it easy to ignore the things that are harder to face. The unresolved feelings, the unanswered questions, the things that come up when he stops moving long enough to actually feel. When you stop reaching out, you disrupt that rhythm. You create a pause that forces him to look inward. At first, he may not even notice. Days might pass before he realizes something feels off. The absence of your messages, your voice, your presence. It's not just silence. It's a void that he can't quite ignore. And in that void, his mind starts to wander. He starts asking himself questions he might not have had to consider before. Why hasn't she reached out? Did I do something wrong? Do I even miss her? And so these questions, whether he likes it or not, lead him to a crossroads where he has to confront the truth about how he feels. Now, let me tell you something. A man's introspection isn't always a loud, dramatic process. It's quiet. It happens in the moments he doesn't expect. When he's driving, lying in bed at night, or going about his day. It's in those moments of stillness that the weight of your absence starts to settle in. He begins to think about the things he's taken for granted. Your kindness, your understanding, your unwavering presence. And if he's honest with himself, he might start to feel a pang of regret. But introspection isn't just about missing someone. It's about understanding why. Why did he pull back? Why wasn't he as present as he could have been? Why did he let things get to this point? These aren't easy questions to answer, and not every man is willing to face them head on. Some will try to distract themselves, to bury those thoughts under work, hobbies, or meaningless interactions. But here's the thing about introspection. It has a way of catching up with you. No matter how far you try to run, you can't escape yourself. For some men, this process can be transformative. It can lead to realizations that push them to grow, to change, to show up in ways they hadn't before. Maybe he realizes that he's been holding back because he's afraid of vulnerability. Maybe he sees that he's been distant because he's been so focused on himself that he forgot relationships are a two-way street. Or maybe, just maybe, he recognizes that he truly values you and doesn't want to lose you. But here's the truth. Not every man will reach that point. Introspection is uncomfortable, and not everyone is willing to sit with that discomfort long enough to learn from it. Some men will avoid it altogether, convincing themselves that the silence doesn't bother them, that they're better off without the connection. And that right there is the clarity you need. This is the third metric, because if a man isn't willing to look inward, to confront his own feelings, to do the work that relationships require, then he's not ready. Not for you. Not for what you bring to the table. Your silence, whether he admits it or not, is a mirror. It shows him not just how he feels about you, but how he feels about himself. Is he someone who's willing to grow, to face his fears, to own up to his mistakes? Or is he someone who avoids, deflects, and runs from anything that feels too real? And let me tell you something important. His introspection, or lack of it, isn't your responsibility. You're not here to fix him, to heal him, to make him see your worth. That's his work to do. Your silence is a gift, not a punishment. It's a chance for him to step up or step away. And either way, you win. Because the man who's meant for you will use that introspection to grow, to meet you where you are, to show you that he's ready for what you deserve. And the one who isn't, well, his silence speaks louder than any words ever could. So don't be afraid to give a man the space to think, to reflect, to face himself. And don't be afraid of what you might learn in the process. Because the truth, no matter how it unfolds, is a gift. And you are the prize, always. When you stop trying to contact him, you create a space that's more than just physical distance. It's emotional distance. And let me tell you something about that distance. It has a way of putting things into perspective, not just for him, but for you too. It's in that space that clarity begins to form. It's where the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth, starts to rise to the surface. Manifestation is part of the journey of healing. And while that truth can be liberating, it can also be challenging to face, especially when it forces you to confront the difference between needing space and being emotionally disconnected. You see, emotional distance is a powerful thing. For some, it creates an opportunity for reflection and growth. For others, it highlights a deeper void, a lack of genuine connection that has been there all along. When you step back, you're giving him a chance to experience life without you in it, even if just for a little while. And in that space, he has to ask himself some hard questions. Do I feel her absence? Do I miss the way she made me feel? Or do I feel relieved? Those are questions only he can answer. And his response, whether through his actions or his silence, will tell you everything you need to know. Because here's the thing, when a man truly values you, emotional distance doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like loss. It feels like something's missing, like the rhythm of his life is just a little bit off. That distance becomes a reminder of everything you brought to his world, your light, your energy, your presence. And if he's invested, if he cares, he'll want to close that gap. He'll want to bridge that distance, not just with words, but with action. But if he doesn't, if he seems unaffected, unbothered, or even indifferent, that's where the clarity comes in. Because emotional distance doesn't create disconnection, it reveals it. It shows you where you really stand in his heart and in his priorities. And as hard as it may be to accept, sometimes the distance reveals that the connection you thought was there was only surface level. But now let's talk about the difference between space and emotional detachment. Space is healthy. It's necessary. It allows both people in a relationship to breathe, to reflect, to recalibrate. Space is about giving each other room to grow as individuals while still holding on to the connection. Emotional detachment, on the other hand, is something entirely different. It's when one person checks out, when their heart, their mind, their attention is no longer in the relationship, even if their body is. When you stop trying to contact him, you're not just giving him space, you're testing the depth of his connection. Because a man who is emotionally invested won't let that distance linger for too long. He won't sit in the silence and let it stretch into something permanent. He'll feel the pull, the need to reconnect, to bridge the gap. And that's not about control or obligation. It's about love. It's about the simple truth that when you care about someone, you don't let distance, whether physical or emotional, grow unchecked. But here's the part that's just as important. While he's figuring out where he stands, you have to do the same. That space you've created, use it. Use it to check in with yourself, to ask the hard questions you might have been avoiding. Was I holding on to something that wasn't holding on to me? Was I trying to force a connection that wasn't mutual? Was I pouring into someone who wasn't pouring back into me? The answers to those questions might not be easy to hear, but they're necessary. Because when you stop trying, when you let that emotional distance settle in, you're not just learning about him, you're learning about yourself. You're learning what you want, what you need, what you deserve. And let me tell you, you deserve more than just someone who fills the silence when it gets too loud. You deserve someone who doesn't let that silence stretch too far in the first place. Someone who values your presence, your love, your effort enough to close the gap when it begins to form. Because love isn't about convenience. It's about commitment. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when it requires effort. So, if the emotional distance you've created reveals that he's not willing or able to meet you there, don't see that as a loss. See it as a gift. Because it's better to know now, in that quiet, in that space, than to keep holding on to something that wasn't real. And if he does step up, if he does use that distance to reflect, to grow, to come back stronger, then you'll know it's because he sees your worth. He values what you bring. He's willing to do the work. And that's the kind of love, the kind of connection that's worth holding on to. Because love, real love, doesn't grow in the noise. It grows in the quiet, in the space, in the distance. It's there that you find out who's willing to stay close, even when you step away. When you stop trying to contact him, you introduce a moment of accountability into the relationship. An unspoken challenge that asks, what are you willing to do now? It's not a demand, it's not a confrontation. It's a simple withdrawal of your energy, your effort, your presence, and it leaves a man with one crucial question. Am I willing to step up, or will I let this slip away? You see, in any relationship, there's a rhythm. a back and forth that keeps the connection alive. When one person is always the initiator, always the one reaching out, always the one putting in the effort, that rhythm is disrupted. It becomes one-sided, it becomes unbalanced. But when you step back, when you stop trying, you reset the dynamic. You create a moment where the other person has to choose to either meet you halfway or let the rhythm fall silent. For a man, that silence can be a wake-up call. It forces him to confront the reality of his actions or his inactions. He starts to realize that the connection he's been relying on isn't guaranteed, that your effort isn't infinite, that your presence isn't something to be taken for granted. It's a moment of truth that can be uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it's also necessary. Because love, respect, and commitment aren't about coasting and temporary. Because love, respect, and commitment aren't about coasting. They're about showing up. Now, accountability isn't always easy. For some men, it's a mirror they'd rather not look into. It forces them to ask themselves questions they might not be ready to answer. Have I been showing her that I care? Have I been putting in the effort she deserves? Have I been the man I want to be in this relationship? These aren't surface level questions. They cut deep. They reveal whether he's been truly invested or just going through the motions. But here's the thing about accountability. It doesn't just expose the flaws. It also offers a chance for growth. For a man who's willing to reflect, to own up to his mistakes, to take responsibility, that moment of silence can be transformative. It can push him to step up, to make changes, to become better, not just for you, but for himself. However, accountability is also a filter. Not everyone will rise to the occasion. Some will choose to avoid the hard truths, to justify their lack of effort, to stay in their comfort zone. And as painful as that realization might be, it's a blessing in disguise. Because the man who can't step up when the silence calls for it, the man who won't take accountability for his part in the relationship, isn't the man who's ready for the love you bring. When you stop trying, you also create a moment of clarity for yourself. It's not just about holding him accountable, it's about holding yourself accountable too. It's about asking, have I been giving too much without asking for enough in return? Have I been ignoring the signs that this connection might not be as strong as I hoped? Have I been settling for less than I deserve? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary. Because accountability goes both ways. It's about recognizing your own worth, your own boundaries, your own needs. It's about understanding that love isn't just about giving, it's about receiving too. It's about mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual care. And when that balance isn't there, it's okay to step back. It's okay to let the silence speak for you. A man who values you, who truly cares for you, won't let that silence linger for too long. He'll feel the shift. He'll recognize what's at stake, and he'll make the choice to show up, to put in the effort, to close the gap. That's what accountability looks like in action. It's not about perfection, it's about intention. It's about showing that he's willing to do the work, to meet you where you are, to be the partner you deserve. But if he doesn't, if he lets the silence stretch on, if he doesn't take the opportunity to step up, if he avoids accountability altogether, that's your answer. That's the truth you need to see, even if it's not the truth you wanted. And as hard as it might be, it's a gift. Because it frees you from holding on to someone who isn't ready, someone who isn't willing, someone who isn't capable of giving you what you need. In the end, stepping back, stopping the effort, isn't about punishment. It's about truth. It's about creating a space where accountability can thrive, where actions can replace words, where the real dynamic of the relationship can come to light. And that's not just about him, it's about you. It's about valuing yourself enough to demand more, to expect better, to hold both of you to a higher standard. Because love, real, lasting, meaningful love, doesn't fear accountability. It embraces it. It grows because of it. And when you stop trying, when you let the silence do the talking, you create the space for that kind of love to either step forward or reveal itself as something less. And that's where the power lies. When you stop trying to contact him, you reclaim something incredibly powerful: your energy, your peace, your sense of self. It's easy to lose sight of those things when you're constantly reaching out, constantly giving, constantly trying to hold something together. But the moment you stop, the moment you let go of that effort, you shift the focus back where it belongs, on you. There's a freedom in that, a kind of liberation. Because too often we find ourselves pouring so much into someone else that we forget to pour into ourselves. We give and give, thinking that our effort will make them see our worth, that our persistence will make them stay, that our love will somehow be enough to fill the gaps they're unwilling to bridge. But love isn't supposed to drain you. It's supposed to nourish you. When you step back, when you stop trying to reach someone who isn't meeting you halfway, you're not just giving them space, you're giving yourself space. Space to breathe, space to reflect, space to remember who you are outside of the relationship. And that's the most important thing. Because no matter how much you care for someone, no matter how deeply you feel, you should never lose yourself in the process of loving them. That silence, that stillness can feel uncomfortable at first. It can feel like a void, like something's missing. And in a way, something is missing. The constant noise, the back and forth, the effort you were putting in day after day. But what's left in that space is something far more valuable: the opportunity to reconnect with yourself. In that quiet, you start to hear your own thoughts again. You start to feel your own emotions without the weight of someone else's actions or inactions clouding them. You begin to see things more clearly. You see the patterns, the dynamics, the way you were showing up and the way they weren't. And most importantly, you see what you want, what you need, and what you deserve. Is there another way? Reclaiming your energy isn't about shutting people out or building walls around your heart. It's about setting boundaries. It's about recognizing that your time, your love, your effort are precious, and not everyone deserves access to them. It's about understanding that love is a two-way street, and if someone isn't willing to meet you in the middle, you're better off walking your own path. And here's the thing: when you take your energy back, when you stop chasing after someone who isn't chasing after you, you start to attract something different. You start to attract peace. You start to attract clarity. You start to attract the kind of people and opportunities that align with your worth. Because when you know your value, when you stop settling for less, the world responds to that energy. But this isn't just about what you attract, it's about what you create. When you stop pouring your energy into someone who doesn't reciprocate, you have more to pour into yourself. You have more to give to your dreams, your passions, your growth. You have more to invest in the things that light you up, that make you feel alive, that remind you of your strength and your beauty. And let's be clear, reclaiming your energy doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're cold or unfeeling. It means you've made a choice to prioritize yourself, to honor your own needs, to protect your peace. It means you've decided to stop chasing after someone who isn't running toward you. And that's not weakness, that's power. The beauty of this process is that it doesn't just change how you see the other person, it changes how you see yourself. You start to realize just how much you've been carrying, just how much you've been giving, just how much you've been holding it all together. And when you let that go, when you allow yourself to rest, to reset, you find a strength you didn't even know you had. Because reclaiming your energy isn't just about walking away. It's about walking towards something greater. It's about stepping into a version of yourself that isn't defined by how much you give to others, but by how much you give to yourself. It's about embracing the truth that you are whole, that you are enough, that you don't need anyone else to complete you. And when you get to that place, when you truly reclaim your energy, you realize that the silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility, full of potential, full of the life you're creating for yourself. So if you're in that moment right now, if you've stopped trying, stopped chasing, stopped giving to someone who isn't giving back, know this: you're not losing, you're winning. You're taking back what's yours. You're reclaiming your power, your peace, your self-worth. And that is the most beautiful, the most courageous, the most powerful thing you can do.